When we look at a squat position, two of the areas that people have a lot of trouble with is both their hips and their ankles. When we go into a deep squat, our hips need to flex quite a bit, but they also need to externally rotate some so that our legs track laterally out over our feet. Our ankles also need to have quite a bit of dorsiflexion, which means our shins are coming closer to our feet while keeping our heels down on the ground. If we can't attain either of those positions, then the rest of our squat gets messed up and we can't load appropriately, we're at risk of injury, and we're not going to be able to squat as well as we want to. So a couple things we can do to work on loosening up the hips first is getting into a couple positions that'll work on that external rotation and that flexion together. So the first position I would recommend is trying to do it with a tabletop, or you can do it with a couch or a chair or something that's higher up rather than going right to the ground. So if I'm just standing next to it and we work on my left hip, what I want to do is try to get my foot up on top there, right? Because now I'm in this deep squat position just on one side instead of doing it on both sides. And from here I can work on stretching out and mobilizing some of that hip a little bit. So what I would recommend you do is with your opposite hand, you're going to grab the top of the foot so that it stays flat so we don't roll over on it. And then with the same side hand, I can work on pushing that knee out, and I feel that into the front of my groin there. From that position, I can also, if I can keep my foot flat, I can now push out while I look away, and that gives me a little bit of a deeper stretch. And then I can also, from this position, keeping that foot flat again, I can go ahead and bend forward. And this is all going to give me some rotation motion into my hip. With all these things, I can play around with a little bit. So if I get into a position where I feel a little bit of some tightness, I want to play around a little bit. So I'm going to kind of make a little bit of a circle with my hips, like I'm drawing a circle on the ground, and I'm going to find, where do I find my most restricted motion? And that's where I want to stretch. And I might need to bend forward more, or I might need to push my leg out while turning my body away at the same time. As we get better at that, we want to transition this into almost a modified pigeon pose, which is where we're on the outside of the foot. Now, if you're doing this barefoot, you might want to have a towel or a padding there because that could get a little uncomfortable. But I'm just going to kind of rotate on the outside of my foot here, and then I'm going to go through those same series of positions, right? I can bring my belly button towards my foot, get me a nice stretch in the back of the hip, right? I might find that pushing my knee and turning away gives me a really nice stretch, or I might find that bending forward position gives me a great stretch. And again, when I get to a position, I want to play around and draw a little bit of a circle on the ground with my hips and find where my restricted motion is. And when I get to that area, I want to eventually stretch those areas for 2 minutes or longer, right? That's where we get those permanent elongation changes. Also from this position, when we're in the pigeon pose, you might find that reaching that arm up and away across your body might be a nice stretch because it creates tension through the system, which affects the way the hip functions. As you do well with that, we want to take this down to the ground. So in a half kneeling position, and I do have my foot tucked underneath me, so it's supporting the knee, I just want to start with those same things. So I'm going to start in this position. I'm going to use my opposite hand to pin down that foot so it stays firm against the ground, and I can push that knee out to the side, right? And from here I can try to bring my belly button down towards my foot, or I can keep in that foot planted, place my hand to the outside and push away my knee while I look away with the opposite direction. Some people actually need to rotate towards it. So as you get flexibility, I might want to be able to put this forearm down on the ground and rotate towards that leg. And I just want to, again, continue to draw circles on the ground with my hip, play around with it, and find where's my spot that I need to stretch, get there and stay for 2 minutes. We can also transition this into the pigeon type pose, right? So we're going to roll into the outside of that foot, and then same thing, I can bring my belly button towards my foot, right? I might find that pushing and looking away works well, or I might find that doing the reach with my arms straight up over my head to the opposite direction creates that tension through the side of my trunk, which creates tension in my hip. If I want to take this up a little bit, I can do this contract relax technique, right? So in this position, what I'm just going to do is take my hand and put it on the outside of my knee, and then I'm going to contract by pushing my knee out into my hand, and that turns on my butt muscle there. And as that butt muscle relaxes, I can take up a little more slack and have a little more flexibility into external rotation. Again, create that contraction, hold it for 5 seconds. As it relaxes, I can go into more external rotation. So I want to continue to work on that. Obviously, I want to work on both sides to create that flexion and external rotation on both hips. So those are both good ones to do kind of towards the end of the day where you're working on getting permanent changes, right? We carry a lot of stress, most people know, in our shoulders and our neck, but also on our hips too. So a lot of people find good relief to do this at the end of the day when you're kind of unwinding and relaxing, or maybe after your workout. But if you're doing a squat workout, a good way that you can kind of get warmed up is in a half kneeling position. I'm going to, again, continue to work on this one you work on both legs. I'm going to step out to the side, so I'm externally rotating that leg. And I'm also going to externally rotate this leg, which means I'm going to turn my foot in, Right, so now both my legs are externally rotated. And now I'm gonna track my thigh over my toes, over my second toe primarily. And as I shift forward there, I feel stretch in my groin on both sides. And I can stay there and I can work in and out of that. And I can try to get into a better flexed and externally rotated position. As I progress that, I'm just gonna rotate this leg back more, maybe to where I get directly out to the side. And I wanna stretch into that again. And again, I feel that on both groins. And then I wanna switch and do it to the opposite side. The other one that works really well, if you're having trouble getting into that loaded position of a squat, is if you lay on your back with your feet up against the wall, we can work on that rotation in and out because we're not putting all the body weight through it. So, if I lay, and I want to get my butt real close to the wall if I can, and have my feet down, and my feet are slightly wider than my hips and knees, keeping my feet flat is I'm just going to work on rolling those hips in and out. Now, if my feet start to come off the wall, I'm really starting to move my back now, right? So I want to keep my feet flat and try to rotate the thighs in and out. And my back won't be getting much motion here, but my hip sockets will. So that's a nice way to warm up a little bit. And then take that and go right into a deep squat with your back ribs against the wall, heels down of course. And then from here, again, I can still work on that rotating in and out, but keep my feet flat, right? I don't want to pick that foot up as I rotate out. That starts to become more of my back moving. And I can just work on that. I can give myself a little bit of assistance with those hands if I need to, work into a little bit of stretch position. So that way I have the flexibility now to get into that deep squat position. And now I just gotta learn to load and be strong in that position. That's how we're gonna loosen up the hips for flexion and external rotation. The other part that people have trouble with is that ankle motion. So what we wanna work on is increasing that dorsiflexion. So that dorsiflexion again is my shin coming closer to my foot with my heel staying down to the ground. A lot of people that have stiffness in the ankle, they're gonna start to come here and then that heel is gonna start to come up, right? That's not a weakness issue as much as it is a mobility issue at the ankle. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our ball, lacrosse ball, tennis ball, whatever you got, and we're gonna put it underneath that foot, and I'm gonna keep my heel down, and I'm just gonna kind of windshield wiper my foot back and forth, right? And I'm gonna kind of work from the base of my toes back towards my heel, and I'm gonna create some mobility in that soft tissue along the bottom of the foot and that plantar fascia. And then I can take it and I'm also gonna roll forward and backwards on that ball, and I wanna roll from my heel to my pinky toe, from my heel to my middle toe, and from my heel to my big toe. And I also wanna go side to side with that, right? And by loosening up some of that connective tissue on the base of our foot, we're naturally gonna have better mobility in our ankle. So both sides, at least 2 minutes on each foot with that. That actually feels really nice. Again, you can do that throughout the day or right before your workout. And that's gonna give me a little bit more ability to get that shin closer to the foot because I have more flexibility in my ankle now. Now, if we need to mobilize it, if it's a stiff joint, what I suggest you do is we can take a strap, and I just have a regular firm belt here. And I'm gonna get into my half kneeling position. And I'm gonna put the belt around the base of my back foot, and then right along the lowest part of my ankle as I can on my front foot. And with my hands, I'm gonna grab behind my upper part of my calf, and I'm gonna give myself a little bit of a forward push with that. So as my hands are pushing forward, the belt is pulling backwards, and then I'm gonna mobilize by shifting my weight forward. Right, but I wanna keep that heel down. If my heel starts to come up a little bit, that's my limit, and then I wanna come back out of that. So I just wanna shift forward and back. Now, if you have this anchored to something else, that's fine, but you can just kind of hook it around the back of your foot like that to get some mobility. And you do that with both sides. So that's gonna help loosen up those ankles so you get into that deeper squat position. Now, as far as loading it and strengthening, that's being appropriate with your dosage, but you have to have the mobility in your hips and in your ankles first. So going through those mobilization techniques, we've worked on increasing your hip flexibility to get into that flexion position so you get into that deep position. We worked on external rotation so that your knees can track out to the side slightly, and we worked on getting that ankle more mobile so you can keep your heels down while you're doing that exercise. Those mobilizations you want to try for a squat, try those out, get into a better position.